Many of you may recall the grand adventure of Lizzie, who braved the world of Pokemon Let's Go Eevee, attempting to beat the game without catching any Pokemon. Well, a pair of new Pokemon games have recently come out, and guess what? Lizzie is back and ready to take on another Pokemon region while holding to her firm convictions on the immorality of catching Pokemon. So without further ado, is it possible to beat Pokémon Scarlet without catching any Pokemon? Before Lizzie embarks on her journey, we'll need to establish the rules, which are honestly pretty simple. We're not allowed to catch any Pokemon. That means Lizzie cannot herself throw a Pokeball at a wild Pokemon and catch it. However, she may acquire Pokemon by any other means that don't involve directly catching a Pokemon, like receiving one from an NPC, or trading one, or, in theory, buying one off of Amazon. Though I'm not sure that actually applies to this game. And that's that! If Lizzie can see the credits roll without having to compromise on her anti-Pokemon catching convictions, then this challenge will have been successful. So let's get into it. Lizzie's journey started with her acceptance to Naranja Academy, and a visit from its director, Mr. Clow. The director brought with him not just some boring old documents, but also 3 Pokemon for Lizzie to choose from to help her get properly started at the academy. Sprigatito, Fuecoco, and Quaxley. This dilemma was a simple matter for Lizzie. She'd always loved cute, fluffy Pokemon, so picking Sprigatito was a no-brainer. Now you may be thinking, CMeeCraft, that's a great post-facto in-universe explanation for Lizzie's decision, but what was the real strategy behind it? How would picking Sprigatito be more beneficial for this challenge than picking one of the other two would have? The answer is that I really didn't have any reasoning that deep for this decision. I was going into this challenge blind, not even knowing what these Pokemon would evolve into, much less what sort of trials awaited us. So I legitimately did just pick the cutest one. And I suppose now I'll mention that just like I did for the Pokemon Let's Go Eevee challenge, this challenge also has a Let's Play of it over on my Let's Play channel. So if you want to see in detail every moment in and decision made during this challenge, go check that out. But for now, back to Lizzie's story. And so, Lizzie entered her first Pokemon battle with her new partner Sprigatito against one Nimona. Luckily, Nimona selected Quaxley for this battle, which Sprigatito just so happened to have a type advantage against, bringing the battle to an easy conclusion in Lizzie's favor. Next thing Lizzie knew, she was being accompanied by her new friend on a journey to Naranja Academy. But on the way, Nimona had some knowledge she wished to impart on Lizzie. And if you want to try to catch Pokemon, you gotta use a good old Pokeball. I've got tons, have a few. Thanks, I guess. Oh, what luck! Time for some learning by doing. Try battling this Lechonk, Lizzie? Can I not? Oh no. Hi. Unfortunately, Lizzie had found herself amidst a Pokemon catching tutorial. After encouraging Lizzie to betray her deepest convictions, Nimona just sat back and watched as Lizzie was accosted by a wild Lechonk. Lizzie tried to run away, but to no avail. It seemed that she had no choice but to start commanding Sprigatito to wail on the poor pig to enable catching it. A scratch, then another. And well, this would be the ideal time to try catching it. But Lizzie refused. She ordered Sprigatito to scratch the Lechonk once more, and just like that, it fainted. And a fainted Pokemon was most certainly not a captured Pokemon. Nimona seemed disappointed in that result, but seemed to take the hint and refrained from trying to continue pushing Lizzie into committing the sin of catching any more Pokemon. And just like that, it seemed that Lizzie had subverted the Pokemon catching tutorial. The two of them continued on, with Lizzie getting into a few more scraps with wild Pokemon along the way. These proved to be quite fruitful encounters, much more so than back in Let's Go Eevee. Back then, an encounter with a wild Pokemon would end in either a catch or running away, neither of which Lizzie benefited from. But here in Pokémon Scarlet, when encountering a wild Pokémon, Lizzie got to battle it, a process that allowed her precious Sprigatito to gain experience and level up, which had already let her learn the move Bite. This would, in the long term, mean that unlike in Let's Go Eevee, here in Scarlet, Lizzie would have the option of grinding wild Pokémon for XP. In theory, that would mean she'd never have to settle for her Pokemon being underleveled, as she always had the opportunity to fight some wild Pokemon to get her levels on par with her opponents, or even surpass them if need be. But those considerations were for the future. For now, what mattered was this joyful trip with Nemona. Unfortunately, it seemed that Nemona was still under the impression that Lizzie intended to catch Pokemon on the way to Naranja. Just as she was asking Lizzie about how many she'd caught, a question Lizzie was not looking forward to answering, a strange cry rang out, interrupting Nemona. Lizzie rushed off to investigate, and oh no! She ended up stranded at the bottom of a cliff! Man, I guess she wasn't going to get the opportunity to tell Nemona how many Pokemon she'd caught now. What a shame, truly. Lizzie approached the strange, injured Pokemon, and unlike what most Pokemon trainers would do in her position, she did not immediately throw a Pokeball at the creature, but instead befriended it by feeding it her sandwich. See? Look what sort of precious natural bonds you can forge with a Pokemon when your knee-jerk reaction isn't to try enslaving it. Anyway, Lizzie's new Pokemon friend was so pleased with her humane treatment of it that it personally escorted her through the treacherous Inlet Grotto, undoubtedly saving her life when some scary dogs attacked. It was quite the exciting encounter, but having survived it, Lizzie and Nemona continued their journey to Naranja Academy. Though not long into their journey, the pair encountered this Arvin fellow, who seemed to have some sort of connection to the Pokemon which was apparently called Koraidon, though he relinquished ownership of it to Lizzie after she easily bested him in battle. Unfortunately, though Lizzie now possessed Koraidon, she couldn't actually bring him out in battle. Therefore, the rest of the trip to Mezagoza ended up being essentially Sprigatito versus the world, and Sprigatito won that matchup with flying colors. Not even a rematch with Nemona and Quaxley gave her much difficulty. She even traded out Tail Whip for Honed Claws along the way, making her all the more formidable. Lizzie thoroughly explored the metropolis of Mezagoza, hoping to find someone willing to give her a second Pokemon, but she had no luck in that search. She did purchase a pretty cute hat, though, and got her very own Terra Orb, which would effectively let her double the same type advantage of Sprigatito's grass-type moves. Quite useful. Finally, Lizzie had made it to Naranja Academy, where she discovered a few plot threads to follow. Trying to become a Pokemon champion, seeking some herbs guarded by Titans, and taking on some hooligans known as Team Star. Then, one time lapse later, it was time for the school treasure hunt, or for those of you uninitiated, basically the start of a standard Pokemon adventure. Oh, also, she discovered that Koraidon, though not battleable, was most certainly rideable. And so, Lizzie set out from Mezagoza en route to challenge the Cortondo Gym. The trek there was no problem, with none of the trainers or wild Pokemon along the way posing much of a threat to Lizzie and Sprigatito. Along the way there, Lizzie had a flash of inspiration. She realized that having been an early purchaser of Pokémon Scarlet, she was entitled to redeem a Pokémon from the internet, a flying Terra-type Pikachu, and so she did just that. She connected to the internet and redeemed that gift Pokemon, and just like that, Lizzie had 2 Pokemon in her party, capable of battling in the Cortondo Gym. Succeeding in that endeavor was easier said than done. Sprigatito was about even leveled with Katie's Pokemon, but Katie's Pokemon were all bug types, which just so happened to be super effective against grass types, like Sprigatito. Pikachu had a flying type move and could even Terraslize to be flying type, but was also about 5 levels underleveled. As such, Katie was able to one-shot both of them, defeating Lizzie handily. Lizzie, recognizing the weakness in her own team, proceeded to beat up wild Jigglypuffs for about 15 minutes before returning to face the gym again, this time with level 13 Pikachu and a newly evolved level 16 Florigato. This time, Lizzie picked Pikachu as her lead Pokemon for the battle. She immediately Terrasized him and rained terror down upon the bug Pokemon with the super effective move, Fly. She healed Pikachu as Katie's Terrasized Teddiursa came out, but it wasn't enough. The Teddiursa dispatched Pikachu with a single series of Fury Swipes, and so it was left to Florigato to face Katie's final Pokemon. Luckily, the Teddiursa had been paralyzed when it attacked Pikachu, leaving plenty of opportunities for Florigato to take advantage of, and ultimately win the fight. With one gym handled, Lizzie turned her attention towards getting to Cascarafa. The road was long, but it was filled mostly with Pokemon that were no issue for Florigato to best. Ground and water types were weak to her grass-type attacks, ghosts were weak to her bright, and grass types didn't pose much of a threat either, since grass is weak when attacking grass. On the way to Cascarafa, Lizzie passed by a mountain that one of those Titans was supposed to be located at. And so she scaled the mountain and came face to face with a humongous stork. It was obviously a flying-type Pokemon, so Lizzie sent out Pikachu to deal with it. But boy did it hit hard. Luckily, by attacking Pikachu, the Titan inflicted itself with paralysis. That paralysis gave Pikachu the opportunity to land a few hits on the bird. But soon it successfully landed one of its own, more or less one-shotting Pikachu. That left the task of finishing off the Bombirder to Florigato. Things didn't start off great. The Titan attacked Florigato with a super effective wing attack, leaving Florigato with just 1 HP. But Florigato came through, landing a critical hit on a Seed Bomb, forcing the Titan to retreat as Arven arrived to give Lizzie some backup. Luckily, during the second phase of the fight, the Bombirder focused its attacks on Arven's tough Nasal, allowing Lizzie to heal Florigato before working with Arven to feint the Titan. After a nice date with Arven, Lizzie moved on towards Cascarafa, ready for whatever challenge the city would throw at her. What she wasn't ready for was a Team Star travel checkpoint. In theory, she could have challenged the Team Star base to neutralize the checkpoint, but Lizzie figured that it would have been better to face the Cascarafa gym first. Since it being a water-type gym, she'd have a type advantage against it, whereas she wouldn't have such a type advantage against the Dark-type Team Star base. It was decided that Lizzie would take a detour through the desert to get to the gym first, then challenge Team Star afterwards once her Pokemon had gotten a bit stronger. The wild Pokemon of the desert were actually kind of strong, a fact Lizzie really took note of as she ventured across the desert again to reach Port Marinata to get a hold of the gym leader. These Donphans especially were a menace, outclassing even Florigato by 10 whole levels. But Lizzie was undeterred, and eventually made it to Porto Marinata. After a pretty one-sided fight, Lizzie helped out the gym leader, hopefully clearing the way for her to challenge the Cascarafa gym. But on the way back, Lizzie came across another Titan, and after mocking it, decided she was in the area anyway, so she might as well battle it. This is probably going to take a while. Let's hone Claws first. And Terrastallize. We'll prep up with a nice little claw honing. This thing is almost certainly ground type, which is good for us, because at least as long as we got Florigato out. Oh, drat. It totally annihilated her team. Like, it wasn't even close. Looking for a win after such a humbling defeat, Lizzie challenged the gym, and thanks to her type advantage and terrestrialization, Florigato single-handedly took out Corfu's whole team. With the Cascarafa plan going swimmingly thus far, Lizzie purchased the bucket hat, the most stylish of hats, and then approached the Team Star base to challenge it. She absolutely embarrassed the guards out front, and was about to waltz in when she realized that she couldn't challenge Team Star without at least 3 Pokemon in her party. And no, Koraidon didn't count. Well, it seemed that Lizzie wasn't going to be doing that for a bit. Grumbling under her breath, she ventured back into the desert. She then proceeded to spend the next hour grinding wild Pokemon in the desert in hopes of getting her team to be strong enough to take on that Titan Great Tusk. Along the way, Florigato evolved into Meowscarada and learned the quite frankly incredible move, Flower Trick, which never misses and always crits. But after all that training, the fight against the Titan was still totally one-sided. Except when Great Tusk opened the fight with a move that wasn't super effective against Meowscarada. In that case, it was totally one-sided in the other direction. In the wake of such a great battle, Meowscarada switched out Bite for Night Slash, and as Lizzie sat with Arven eating sandwiches, she really internalized her team's glaring weakness. Both Pikachu and Meowscarada were total glass cannons. Given the right conditions, they could hit like freight trains, but even just one super effective move from an equivalent leveled Pokemon would often one-shot them. With only 2 Pokemon, that was not a strategy Lizzie could count on, especially as the trainers she was going up against continually increased the number of Pokemon in their teams. In order to mitigate this, she gave Pikachu and Meowscarada some items to help their defense and special defense stats grow faster over time. Before doing anything else, it was time to go take some classes, before heading east towards Artisan. Lizzie was shocked by just how weak everything was in this area. She was fighting Pokemon close to level 10, with Pokemon around levels 30 and 40. Perhaps she thought grinding in the desert for an hour to face a Titan Pokemon wasn't quite the route the developers had expected players to take. So in short, Lizzie had absolutely no difficulty whatsoever as she defeated the Stony Cliff Titan, conquered the Artisan Gym, bested the Levincia Gym, and hunted the lurking Steel Titan. After all that, Lizzie made her way to Alfornada, a trek that was relatively easy thanks to it mostly taking place in a cave with loads of rock and ground-type Pokemon, which a grass-type like Meowscarada was super effective against. The city's gym should have also, in theory, been easy given how it was a psychic gym, and therefore should have been simple since Meowscarada was a grass dark dual type, and dark was effective against psychic. Unfortunately, Lizzie was taken off guard by Tulip's Gardevoir, leading to a super effective hit on Meowscarada and a loss. When she retried the gym, she swapped out for Raichu when the Gardevoir showed up. Oh, and yeah, Lizzie's Pikachu was now a Raichu. Anyway, after avoiding that stumbling block, the rest of the fight was easy, granting Lizzie her 5th gym badge. The Medali Gym was Lizzie's next destination. Or it would have been if Lizzie didn't have to go back to Naranja Academy to take her midterms, which she totally aced. Now as for Medali, the trek there was relatively simple. The area was certainly higher leveled than the East was, but ultimately comfortably beneath the level of Lizzie's dynamic duo. After a bit of sleuthing, she found herself facing the Medali gym leader, and low-key, the best character in the game, Larry. Now Larry specialized in normal-type Pokemon, which didn't have too many strengths, but unfortunately, Lizzie's available types also weren't very effective against them. However, Lizzie's sheer level and stat advantage allowed her to win relatively smoothly. With that gym behind her, Lizzie figured the moment was ripe to take on the nearby False Dragon Titan, the last of the Titans left for her to face. And she was more than ready as she rode Koraidon across Lake Casaroya. Meowscarada had even learned the move Play Rough, a fairy-type move, which would surely serve her well in a fight against a dragon. Of course, the Titan was, unsurprisingly, a false dragon, i.e., not dragon-type. But hey, Lizzie had an even better matchup against water-type Pokemon, which the false dragon actually was, so no tears shed here. But then Phase 3 of the fight threw Lizzie a real curveball by being against Tatsuguri, an actual dragon. Though like I said, Lizzie was prepared for this possibility with Meowscarada's Play Rough, and with that, Lizzie had overcome all 5 Titan Pokemon, gained the Herba Mystica, became friends with Arven, and unlocked all of Koraidon's movement abilities. But before she could tie that plot thread in a nice little bow, she had to battle Arven himself. And he was no joke. Meowscarada was able to edge out Greedence, but then Scovillain took her by surprise by being a grass fire type, and resultantly one-shot her. Then Raichu was just straight up outclassed by it by being underleveled, leading to Lizzie's defeat. Seeing clearly that her Pokemon required more training before they'd be able to beat Arven, Lizzie made the frigid trek to the Montenevra Gym to train. The Pokemon there being comfortably under Lizzie's Pokemon's levels, and being predominantly Ghost-type, which Meowscarada had a great matchup against, led to an easy victory over the gym. Still feeling that her Pokemon weren't quite up to taking on Arven yet, Lizzie did some grinding on the actually kind of tricky Skorat Trail. She also taught Raichu Encore, figuring it was the sort of move that would have to be useful at some point, right? And then it was time for a rematch. This time, Meowscarada took down Greedent damageless. Then Lizzie got Raichu involved for Scovillain, who with a couple of flights took down that Pokemon damageless as well. Garganacl stood basically no chance against Meowscarada due to the type advantage. Then Meowscarada proceeded to one-hit kill the Toedscruel and Cloyster. And then there was Mabosstiff, which Meowscarada theoretically had a super effective move to use against, Play Rough. There were just 2 issues. Issue number 1. Mabosstiff also had the move Play Rough, which was super effective against Meowscarada. And issue number 2, Meowscarada missed her attack. But so did Mabosstiff, so Meowscarada was still in it. But even once Meowscarada landed the hit, it was far from impressive. And Lizzie got overconfident, underestimating Mabosstiff's damage-dealing potential, causing Meowscarada to faint. Raichu was one-shot, but not before buying enough time for Meowscarada to revive. Finally, Meowscarada pulled through an attack that should have been lethal, and revived Raichu. Then made an attack that would surely leave her vulnerable to be fainted, hoping Raichu would be able to finish the job. But Mabosstiff missed, giving Meowscarada the chance to finish him off, thus winning the battle and completing that Titan Pokemon Herba Mystica storyline. 2 more to go now. Lizzie was pumped to tackle the last gym, but first she had to take her finals, which she passed. In the jubilation at having passed all her classes, Lizzie took the chance to just sort of hang out with the school's faculty. It was during that time of revelry that her language teacher, Mr. Salvatore, bestowed upon her a wonderful gift. A Meowth. Finally, Lizzie had a 3rd Pokemon in her party. She ended up using a bunch of candies to level up her new Meowth to level 53 and get it evolved into a Berserker. And boy did she have a good form to test it out in. The final gym, which just so happened to be ice-focused, which, as we all know, is weak to steel, which Berserker is. Berserker more than proved his worth by soloing Grusha's whole team. Lizzie finally had a trio of Pokemon, and pretty competent ones at that. She realized this meant she could finally take on Team Star's hideouts, which is just what she did, eliminating all but the fighting one without so much as breaking a sweat. Now as for the fighting one, well, Eri was quite a formidable opponent. She opened with a Toxicroak, which really did a number on Meowscarada, actually fainting her. Luckily, Raichu was able to come in, Terrasilize, and finish it off. As a flying type, Raichu was quite well situated to take on a team of fighting type Pokemon, which of course, flying was super effective against. That wasn't to say each matchup was an auto win though. This Passimian had access to Rock Throw, which was super effective against Raichu. But against Berserker, it did next to nothing. But close combat on the other hand, yeah, it was kind of devastating. Luckily, Berserker was able to revive Meowscarada before fainting. Although it should be noted that close combat was also super effective against Meowscarada. As a last-ditch effort, Lizzie ordered Meowscarada to, on 1 HP, go for broke with a Play Rough attack, which one-shot the Passimian. No such luck against Lucario, though. A Thunderbolt worked pretty well, though. And finally, it all came down to Raichu versus a Rivavrom, which some Flight managed to take down. With that, it was time to close the book on Team Star. In the process of closing said book, Lizzie ended up fighting Dirk Clavel, who had a pretty easy team for her to best, with the exception of his Skeledirge, which Raichu was only barely able to faint. Finally, Lizzie had to face Penny, who had an adorable team of nothing but Eevee evolutions, which was something Lizzie certainly approved of. Luckily, Lizzie had a decent type matchup for each evolution. Meowscarada and her Play Rough for Umbreon, Berserker for Leafeon. Raichu for Flareon admittedly wasn't great, but he was able to at least get a Pyrrhic victory. Vaporeon versus Meowscarada was like watching the Super Bowl champions take on a JV team, and Jolteon didn't fare any better. Finally, Berserker had what it took to take down Sylveon, and just like that, the Team Star arc was finished too. All that remained was becoming a Pokemon champion. After going through an interview process, Lizzie went forth to battle against the Elite Four. First up was Rika, who primarily had ground-type Pokemon. And yeah, Meowscarada just about soloed the whole team. So, good job, Rika. Poppy was much trickier. She specialized in Steel-type Pokemon, and Lizzie didn't have a single move that was super effective against Steel. So her strategy ended up being a bit janky. First, she had Berserker Screech a Copperaja into submission. Next up was a Bronzegong, which, being Ghost-type as well as Steel, Meowscarada could Night Slash quite effectively. Then, Meowscarada just sort of endured a tough back and forth with a Corviknight. It was Raichu's job to take down Magnezone. Unfortunately, the Magnezone put up a light screen, making Raichu's Thunderbolt considerably less effective. This was especially annoying since that was the one attack Raichu had that was at least somewhat effective against Steel, but it was actually really good news, because it gave Raichu the chance to encore that move, preventing the Magnezone from using any direct attacks for what ended up being the rest of the battle. That gave Raichu the chance to slowly chip away at its health with Iron Tails. Poppy's last Pokemon was a Tinkaton, which quickly fainted Raichu. However, before fainting, Raichu had dealt enough damage to set Meowscarada up for the finishing blow. Next up was the game's best character, Larry! This time, though, he was using a flying-type team. Though, I will say I'm half convinced that's just because there's so much overlap between the two types. Anyway, needless to say, Raichu was pretty effective against his team. That just left Hassel, the Dragon Trainer. And with a bit of healing and playing rough, Meowscarada made short work of his team. And finally, to become a true champion, Lizzie had to defeat Geeta. Her Espathra went down in one hit from Meowscarada. Next up, Berserker made short work of her Go-Goat. Lizzie thought Berserker would be a good choice against Avalugg, but instead he got one shot. So she sent out Raichu to hopefully finish it off with Iron Tails, which just barely worked. Then it was Meowscarada versus Kingambit, a very tough matchup. Meowscarada just couldn't get a chance to counterattack, as the Kingambit always threatened to faint her with just 2 hits, leading to her healing up every turn to avoid such a fate. Eventually, Lizzie decided to bite the bullet and have Meowscarada Terrasilize for a desperate sacrificial offensive. Fortunately, Meowscarada survived what should have been lethal damage, allowing her to take out the Kingambit without falling herself. Then Geeta's Veluza went down easily. Finally, Raichu came in to take down Geeta's last Pokemon, a Glimmora. And with that, Lizzie was officially a Pokemon champion. But she wasn't finished yet. To truly prove herself, she'd have to battle Nemona in a no-holds-barred contest. Meowscarada obliterated Nemona's Lycanroc, like usual. Then Nemona's Pawmot got the better of Raichu, but Meowscarada was able to finish it off. Goodra then went down pretty easily. Lizzie sent out Berserker to deal with Nemona's Orthworm, but he only survived long enough to revive Raichu. The Orthworm's Earthquake was super effective against Raichu, but he didn't get one-shot, and as a result, Raichu was the one who walked away from that matchup. Then Nemona's Dunsparce didn't live long enough to do anything to Meowscarada. And finally, Quaxquavel continued in always being bested by Meowscarada. Lizzie had won, finally earning Nemona's true respect. But she still wasn't finished, for she had a burning desire to know what was in Area 0. Lizzie entered Area 0 with all the friends she had made along the way. It was a strange, beautiful place, but honestly not one which gave Lizzie much difficulty. But that's not to say that Lizzie's final opponent was a pushover. Lizzie faced the strangest of Pokemon, but one by one they fell before her. But the Roaring Moon was different. It fainted even Meowscarada over and over and over again. But through a copious quantity of max revives and intentional sacrifices, Meowscarada got a few chances to hit the Roaring Moon, fainting it and winning the battle. But Lizzie still wasn't finished, for her foe had one last trick up her sleeve, a Koraidon. And in this battle, Lizzie couldn't bring out a single one of her Pokemon to fight for her, save for her own Koraidon. Finally, Koraidon was willing to battle for Lizzie's sake. The legendary beasts fought, but ultimately, it was Lizzie's Koraidon, and Lizzie who were victorious. And though the ending of Lizzie's story in Paldea was admittedly a bit melancholic, she had succeeded, and proved that it is possible to beat Pokémon Scarlet without catching any Pokémon. At least for now, anyway. What do I mean by that? Well, I'm pretty sure that Event Pikachu from the internet was required for this challenge to be a success. And it's not going to be around anymore after February 28th of 2023. So, if you want to try this challenge for yourself, I'd recommend doing so sooner rather than later. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed what you've seen here today. If you want to truly see every moment and detail of this challenge, then I'd recommend you check it out in Let's Play form on my Let's Play channel. Additionally, if you're interested in watching more challenge videos like this one, then there's a wealth of them for you to enjoy on this channel, including the aforementioned Pokemon Let's Go Eevee No Catching Pokemon Challenge. Trust me, that one's something special. So have a look around and maybe consider subscribing while you're at it. Perhaps even ringing the bell so you can be notified of my future uploads. And if you really want to support me, you may want to join my Patreon, like these fine individuals on screen, especially the $15 tier patrons, Enigmatic Mr. L and Ashfern Says. Or you may want to buy the card game I designed, Time Travel Entertainment Incorporated, from Button Shy Games. But anyways guys, until next time, I've been CMeeCraft, ready to sink my teeth into the next challenge. Goodbye.